Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday, which means it is time for the 49ers Throwback Show. I am Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and with me, as always, on Tuesday, my partner in crime, So Real, Suneil from So Real Sports Talk TV here on YouTube. How you doing, Suneil?
I'm doing well, Jack. I've been missing our conversations, man. I don't know why. For some reason, this Tuesday felt a little bit longer than before. I guess there wasn't too much crazy 49er news in the middle of it, which I guess kept me from feeling like we were just talking like yesterday. But I'm glad I'm finally back on here with you.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's always fun to talk to you. Yeah, and it has been the last week has been kind of a long one. It seems like.
I don't know why.
They had rookie minicamp last Friday, and it feels like it's been a long time since rookie minicamp took place. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's actually why I wanted to get on here, because I know you were there. And one thing, Jack, that I don't think you get enough credit for was you were, I believe, the first person to mention that Elijah Mitchell was that dude. And I remember hearing it out of your mouth like very early on, that more than maybe any other rookie that was on the field, Elijah Mitchell looked like the guy that you thought could go out and have like a breakout season. With that being said, because that actually ended up happening, I know you were at rookie minicamp as well, and I wanted to get a sense, did anybody pop out like Elijah Mitchell popped out to you? Or would that even be, because I know that was more training camp than rookie minicamp, but did you see any flashes of anybody that caught your eye the way maybe Elijah Mitchell caught your eye last year?
Yeah, it's a little bit harder right now because we only saw one practice. The Elijah Mitchell thing, I liked him early on, but then after watching him through a few practices, and then once the pads came on, that's when he really started to show more for me. But, I will say this, all of the rookies that were the draft picks, those 9 draft picks, other than Kalia Davis, because he didn't take part in any workouts, the other 8 draft picks looked really good. I mean, you could see why they were taking the draft compared to you could see why they were drafted instead of an undrafted compared to the other undrafted free agents or tryout players that were there. There was a gap there between those two. As far as who caught my attention, what I'll say is, again, I'm going to keep to everybody. What I've read of scouting reports and what I've seen of the film on some of these guys as I've watched through, showed up at practice on Friday. We only got to see one of the 3 practices. Friday was the only one that was open to the media. But Friday was the day, and I'll say, if people that jumped off the page at me, I would have to start off with Spencer Burford. He jumped out. I know that he wasn't going against the defensive lineman, but I spent a lot of time watching the offensive line work. They're just working together because there's only 2 defensive linemen there. And so the offensive linemen just were working together. But just from, being able to watch that, the noise coming off of Spencer Burford's hands was different than everybody else. That goes to a scouting report. The report on him was that he had strong hands, really good striking ability. And you could hear that. You could actually hear it with your ear, hear it while you're standing there, which was cool because normally at 49ers practices, the noise is so loud because of the music. The music was still on, but it wasn't overpowering like it is sometimes. And so you could hear bits and pieces. We're far enough away so you can't hear exactly what's being said, but you could hear the slap of his hands. You could hear when the offensive line coaches were excited about a rep. You could hear the defensive backs when they were doing 7-on-7 communicating out the calls to each other with the coverages and as guys went in motion and stuff like that. So that was all really cool. But Spencer Burford jumped out for me, and then also Danny Gray looked really good. He looked the part of a 3rd round draft pick at wide receiver, and I thought that Samuel Womack looked the part of a NFL cornerback, at least for the day.
Yeah, and that bodes well, right? Because those 3 could possibly be guys that may have, a role, especially Womack and Danny Gray. They might be getting, a few more reps than, maybe some of these other rookies, just because they play in a position that might be needed at some point. If any of the receivers go down, Danny Gray is probably going to have to jump in there and, run some routes. And then Womack, I think that that battle for the slot corner or the nickel corner is a wide open one between him and maybe Quez or whomever else they have eyeing that position. So that's good that, you know, these guys are showing, you know, some talent. I know you're pretty good at, you know, you're pretty honest. If you see somebody struggling, you're going to say, oh, this guy, you know, struggled. And who knows? I mean, obviously they're going up against other rookies. Can you give, you know, obviously one of the things that maybe I know I am, and, you know, I'm sure some of the guys that are watching the show as well, you know, we don't get to experience it as much for either not having the credentials or just for me, I'm not even around. Can you give like a sense of what rookie minicamp is like? You know, what are you looking at? Like, what is the whole experience like, Jack, as far as being able to see these guys? What coaches are there, and what do you think from what you're seeing is the overall sense of what the goal is through rookie minicamp? What are they really trying to achieve?
Yeah, this is the first time that I've been there for rookie minicamp. The first time that you know, the credential and all that stuff for me and be able to get to practice, that all started for me right before training camp last year. So to be at the mini camp was a different experience. And what I gathered and what I took away from it was that there was a lot of teaching going on. These are guys who I was, you know, if I had to step back, I would say there's a ton of teaching going on because you only have 9 guys that are out there that you've drafted. And so you're expecting them to already, there's an expectation with them, but you also have all these other guys. They had 30 something guys out there. You have a number of players who aren't necessarily up to speed with where you want them to be. And this was their time to really get coached up, because when they come back in a few weeks for the mandatory mini camp with the veterans, they're not going to get those reps. So this was their time for some one-on-one coaching up and teaching. And I left, you know, I was thinking about it quite a bit over the weekend. And one of the things that I will say that was really cool about it is that, you know, these are guys who have spent their entire lives working to get to the NFL. And so to be there for the first day of them experiencing life in the NFL, that was a pretty cool deal. And I hope that I never lose
sight of that.
Yeah, sight of that, because that's important, you know. And so when I talk about, like, for example, you asked, you know, guys that struggled, guys that I felt like, you know, weren't exactly what I would have expected them to be. Jason Poe, for example, is a guy who everybody's really excited about. And I think he's going to have a ways to go. He's going to really have, he's not polished when it comes to his footwork and his hand placement and all those types of things. And there was a lot of work going on with him. Same thing to a lesser extent with Donovan West, the other undrafted free agent that was in camp. He you know, there was a difference. I thought he felt like he was a little bit more comfortable. It just seemed like, you know, Jason Poe was a little uncomfortable. Like, you could tell that was his first day and he was trying to figure out what he was doing. And but again, it's day one. You know, by Sunday, everything could have been completely different for these guys, because, you know, you go out there, get those jitters out, you learn some things, and then you start to apply what you're being taught. And who knows what it was like by Sunday. I mean, we know that they signed Troy Fumagalli, who was a tryout player. They signed him and released one of their undrafted free agent tight ends, the kid out of North Carolina today. So, you know, guys were fighting for spots to join the roster as well. So it was fun. It was cool getting to watch the process start for the rookies in particular.
I like that. And I mean, I had 3 follow-up questions. One you kind of led into, so I'll start with that one. Some of these undrafted free agents are guys that, you know, guys like me and some other people pretty excited about. Donovan West was one of them. Poe was another one, because obviously that center position moving forward, you know, there is some rumors about Alex Mack. You know, he was seen on the premises, so nobody knows if it's to clean up his stuff or, you know, because he's actually, you know, coming back. So I don't know if we'll hold off on that one. But
that ended up not being Alex Mack. That was Daniel Brunskill.
All right, well, that cleared that up pretty quickly. But yeah, so but needless to say, the center position moving forward for the 49ers is a big question mark there as far as who's the center of the future. So Donovan West and Jason Poe are guys that, you know, could be in that role if they step up. Another guy is the safety Leon
O'Neal.
Yeah, Leon O'Neal Jr. That's another guy that a lot of people are excited about. So I know you said there was a big drop off from the drafted to the undrafted, but out of these undrafted players, did anybody kind of look like they could be somebody that may make a practice squad or even may make the team?
I think it's going to be really hard for the undrafted free agents to make the roster. Maybe Donovan West will be able to make it because he plays a position that might be of need for the 49ers. If Alex Mack chooses not to come back, then that could open up a spot on the roster. But beyond that, I think it's going to be really tough. They had some good linebackers out there as well. The receivers that were out there are really, they have some really strong receivers on their out of their undrafted free agents. But I don't know if any of those guys are going to make the 53-man roster. This team is extremely deep. That's why partly when I'm listening to some of the conversations that I hear about this team and the record and things like that, I wonder if we're talking about the same team, because this team has a lot of talent across the board.
Right. And depth, and I think the depth thing is something that's lost sight of because, we've beat this, drum so hard, especially you and me, Jack, I think more than others. A lot of people are looking that the 49ers didn't make these big splashes in the offseason and whatnot. And I think there was a concerted effort for this team to realize, look, we've never been out-talented by any team in the league. The issue that we've had is when our talent goes down, we don't have equivalent or close enough talent behind them where there's just like this huge drop-off, right? And injuries are naturally going to happen. So I think this team was more concerted in having valuable depth pieces versus just top-tier talent, because they've been able to bring in and draft and develop top-tier talent throughout. So I think that depth piece is what really is being undervalued, not only by some of the fan base, but I think some of the national media, where a lot of these teams might look better on paper because they have more recognizable names. But inevitably, when one of these guys go down, which is just naturally happening in football, then what happens? Whereas I think the 49ers are going to have that sustainable level to not only be able to rotate players to keep your stars healthy, but also in the worst case event of some stars going down, you still have viable options behind them to be able to still produce to keep you afloat till those stars come back.
Yeah, I think they're in a good spot with the only, and I think I'll say it here again, just for anybody who might be watching for the first time. As long they've dealt with a lot of injuries and been successful. The times that this team hasn't been good, outside of 2017, of course, and maybe even 2018, because they were still building at that point. But 2020 was a team that for all intents and purposes should have been a playoff team if they just had a quarterback that was healthy throughout that season. That was not Nick Mullins or CJ Beathard. I think that's a team that's in the playoffs. So you look at that team, this team now, and I see a lot of similarities. I think this team's even better than it was in 2020. I think you look across the board, and there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about how this team's going to, do this season. And I think that's partly why, I came out with a 13-4 projection as far as the record.
Nice. Now, obviously, we can't talk about rookie camp and not talk about the first two draft picks that the 49ers made. So anything you could talk about what you saw out of Drake Jackson and obviously Tyrion Davis-Price?
Yeah, that's what's hard, right? Because didn't really watch anything with Drake Jackson. There was only two defensive linemen there. So I only watched him from a far distance. I didn't make the trek over to watch him and the other defensive lineman that was on hand, Kevin Atkins from Fresno State, the undrafted free agent. Those were the only two defensive linemen that were there that were able to practice. Kalia Davis was on hand, but he was working on a side field. So I didn't really get a chance to watch him other than from afar, like I said.
Anything stand out about maybe his physique or just the stature? Like, does he remind you, as far as build wise, any of the defensive ends that are defensive linemen that you've seen?
Yeah, I was just about to go there, because that's
nice.
Before practice, we did have a chance to talk to Drake Jackson and Tyrion Davis-Price in the media room before practice. Drake Jackson reminds me of his body type reminds me of D Ford.
Wow.
You look at Nick Bosa, right? Nick Bosa has these huge thighs, and he's just ripped. He's big for a guy that plays that position. And you look at a D Ford or Drake Jackson, and in comparison to Nick Bosa, they're slight, right? They're not you you don't have those thigh muscles quite the same size as a Nick Bosa, right? They're not quite as built up as that. But that's because they're coming off and they have a different. Their game's different. There's a speed game, not so much of a power game, and that's kind of what I see there. This is a guy who, he has a really good bend. He's quick. He's explosive off the line of scrimmage. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. As far as Tyrion Davis-Price, it's kind of the same situation. It's we got the chance to talk to him before practice. He was he actually took the time to introduce himself to each of the writers that was there, which was cool. And he seems, he's a guy who is very confident in his abilities. But as far as practice goes, no shoulder pads, no helmet, no full team drills. So it wasn't really a practice that was set up for Tyrion Davis-Price to shine. Because when they got together as a group, it was either run and pass plays against air or 7-on-7 with no offensive linemen, which just doesn't really, suit his game.
Tyrion Davis-Price, his stature, how does he measure out compared to the other receivers, other running backs on the roster, who you imagine being the other running backs in that running back room? Is he bigger than these guys? Is he around the same size? Like
he seemed to be about the same size as Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon, bigger size like that. He's looking to play right now. He was 211, 212 at the scouting combine, but he's looking to put on about 10 pounds to play at 222, between 222 and 225 is the weight that they're looking for him to play at. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does once we get the training camp with the pads on, and contact becomes a part of the game.
That's nice. Anything else that stood out to you?
For me, the way that like I said, because of the way that there's only so much you're gonna get by watching receivers run routes with nobody across from them, against air, and watching quarterbacks throw in that situation, right? So that's why I was had wandered over and was really paying more attention to the offensive linemen, which was fun. You could see it's a little bit more regular football, although they're not going up against defensive linemen. And like I said, you could hear the coaches a little bit, so you could tell when a rep was good. They were, you could hear the compliments and things like that from the coaches. When they made a mistake, you could hear that as well. Like I said, you couldn't totally hear exactly what they're saying, but it was enough to know if it was a good rep or a bad rep, and that helped me out a little bit there. And then when they would go to 7-on-7 period, where I was standing, I could just turn and watch the 7-on-7 from the angle that I like anyway, just behind the quarterback as close as I can get on the sidelines. And so when they went to 7-on-7, my focus was primarily on Samuel Womack and Tariq Castro-Fields and their coverage of Danny Gray. I wasn't really worried, if Danny Gray was on the left side against Tariq Castro-Fields, I wasn't paying attention really over to what Womack was doing and so on and so forth. And those were some good battles. The first play of the practice, they tried to run a quick slant to Danny Gray, working against Tariq Castro-Fields. Castro-Fields did a really nice job in coverage, and it was somewhere between a PBU and a drop. They were right on top of each other. It was a bang bang play for everybody. It was a nice one. The next play was a throw to the flat to Davis-Price, who butchered it and didn't come down with the catch. I think my two biggest takeaways, or three, was the deep ball from Brock Purdy, to Danny Gray. Danny Gray ran a deep post on Tariq Castro-Fields. Castro-Fields was playing zone with outside leverage and had no way of getting his hands on him. He just ran right by him, and the safety was too far inside, and the ball was hung up in the air. If it was Trey Lance, it's a touchdown. And then the other one was a quick out route to Danny Gray. Castro-Fields got a really good jump on it. I could see just from my angle at it, I could see the break, and I could see it looked like he was going to intercept this thing. He had it all over. It looked like he was going to be all over it, and didn't come away with the interception. or knock it down. Instead, Gray catches it and runs up the sidelines. And that's concerning to me because that's kind of who Castro Fields, I think, is, in that he's a guy who has all the physical traits that you're looking for, but doesn't have the productivity to match it. And I think that's why he slid down to the 6th round. On the other side of the ball, we had a couple of really good. Only Gray and Womack only matched up twice. The first time Womack was in zone coverage and Gray ran about a 10-yard in route on him and beat him. Nice catch. Still on that one, even on that one, Womack did a good job of driving on it, but he just couldn't get there to knock the ball away. And my favorite rep between the two was actually the ball didn't even come in their direction, so I don't know if anybody was even paying attention, but I was. And it was one-on-one coverage. So I saw them line up, and I knew it was going to be man coverage between the two, so I just focused on that. And it was really good, hand fighting at the line of scrimmage. Gray got to the outside, and Womack just turned and was able to run stride for stride with him down the sideline. And you knew it was a good match. It was a good rep because both of them were excited at the end of the play. Kind of, jawing at each other, celebrating the play, slapping hands and all that kind of stuff. So you knew it was a good rep, right? And then as far as the best catch of the day actually was one of the tryout invitees, Kiki Chisholm, on a deep route down the right sideline. The quarterback was Manny Wilkins, another tryout guy. He put the ball up high on a streak to Chisholm, who went up high, kind of had the high point the ball, spinning around, came down with both feet in bounds. If I'm the coach watching that, it's a great catch by the receiver. At the same time, I'm chewing out Wilkins because he had Danny Gray right open over the middle of the field for a bigger gain than what they got out of it. Gray was really impressive. He was clearly the best receiver on the field.
That's awesome. Good to hear. Last question, and then we can move on. Were all the big name coaches there, or was this more line coaches? Who all was out there on day one?
No, this was a regular practice, like always. They like they would have. So all their coaching, the full coaching staff was there. Kyle Shanahan didn't really get involved with the play calling like he does during training camp practices. He stood back mostly watching and observing. Him and John Lynch actually stood about 70 yards away from the action in the middle of the field, watching the offense and defense go at it in 7-on-7s, and then they'd kind of turn around and watch from different locations. So they were all there. And then also Vic Fangio, the head coach of the Denver Broncos from last year and former 49ers defensive coordinator, was on hand as well, taking it in.
What about D'Amico?
I believe he was there. I didn't see, because usually D'Amico Ryans is always on the sidelines, and they were away from us on the other side of the field. And gotcha. So I wasn't sure or not, but I think he was.
And last question, Anthony Lynn, what group was he mainly working with? Was he there, and what group was he mainly working with? Running backs?
The running backs.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. The running backs, and then you have Brian Gracie working with the quarterbacks. And I was kind of wanting to see what their routine was going to be. And it didn't, it looked a little bit different than what we saw from last year. So I'm looking forward to getting back up there when they have the full team there in a couple of weeks. The rookies showed, like I said, the rookie draft picks showed out really well. And now I want to see what they do against all the veterans. That's the next step in this process for them, is doing it against the veterans. And that'll be important for them as we get headed into training camp.
Cool. So your guess of which of these rookies make the 53-man roster based off of one viewing that has nothing to do with practice, pads, or anything. Your way too early guess of which of these rookies actually make the squad.
I think they all make the squad. Kalia Davis is going to be, I think, on the physically unable to perform list at the start of the year. So he's not on the squad, part of the 53 when they break cap, because that doesn't count. Tariq Castro Fields, I don't think he's there. I think that you're going to see the offensive linemen are, I think there's a really strong chance. I don't know if we talked about this, but I know that I wrote an article a couple of weeks back about the 49ers players that are going into their final season as 49ers. One of those was Mike McGlinchey, and watching, I know it's just one day, but watching Spencer Burford the way he moves out there, and then also knowing what I've seen of him on film. I think he's going to be a right tackle for the 49ers in a year or two. I think beyond that, beyond Tariq Castro-Fields and not making it, and Kalia Davis on the physically unable to perform list, I think the rest of them make the roster.
Nice.
Well, and maybe not Purdy. Brock Purdy might end up as the practice squad guy,
scout guy.
Yeah, so they can maybe go a little bit heavier on the defensive line or offensive line.
It's interesting. I mean, one thing this 49ers team has gotten really good at drafting guys that not only make the roster, but for a long time. So to have, 8 out of the 9 is kind of what you're speculating, make the team. I think that's a good number. And who knows, maybe Tariq can show out and, make the roster as well. But the cornerback room is pretty deep now for the 49ers. So you're going to have to beat out some pretty good talent to make this secondary room, to say the least.
Yeah, well, the 49ers have been doing a really good job of keeping their draft picks. You go back to 2019, and from 2019 to now, there's only 3 players that aren't still with the team. So they've done a good job of keeping their draft picks on the roster and making good use of them. You go back to 2018, and even some of those guys are still around because those are the ones that have moved. Some of them have moved on, and so on and so forth. But they've done a really good job over the last few years, and I think there's a good chance that these draft picks from this season are going to be. You could see how they fit into their plans, beyond 2022.
It's awesome. Yeah, and I mean, you asked go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to transition because I thought you asked a really good question, off camera to me, or I think you texted or something. But, with all the rookies coming in, the team, we're pretty high on how the team is built. I know I'm super positive. I actually am much like you, Jack. I thought that the team was going to finish off, 12-5, 13-4. So pretty high praise, to take this team and have 2 or 3 more wins than they did last season, especially, when you're bringing in a lot of youth. Trey Lance going to be a first-year starter, a lot, Aaron Banks most likely going to be moving in at, left guard. So, new guys in the secondary, things like that, and still thinking that, they could actually elevate themselves from last year. Mm-hmm. But, you were mentioning, what are maybe some blind spots that we're seeing or some things we might be taking for granted or overlooking? What do you think could be some things or what would hold them back from being able to achieve 12-5, 13-4, like both of us expect them to be?
Yeah, I think you kind of almost have to do that position group by position group, because if you want to nitpick them and you want to say this is the reason why they're not going to be successful, it's pretty easy to do that. I think, quarterback position, Trey Lance doesn't turn out to be the guy that you expected him to be, right? Say what you want about Jimmy Garoppolo, but when Garoppolo's been healthy, he's been successful. I know that there's other reasons for it other than just Jimmy Garoppolo, but still, when he's been healthy, the team's won. So if Trey Lance isn't the guy that you isn't worth the investment you made, that could be a reason why they don't win, 10 games or 9 games even. Don't make the playoffs, I guess is the way to put it. The running back room, they don't stay healthy. Because we've seen that already with that group. Tyrion Davis-Price isn't the breakaway threat that some people think, and so all of it because they don't have that running back that can be the game breaker, and they've kind of put it on Trey Lance's shoulders to do that. It all falls apart. Alex Mack doesn't come back, and Daniel Brunskill is fine at right guard, so they try to do Drake Brendel at center, and he flops. Things like that. I mean, you can go through, and there's enough. You can go through every position group if you want to be that way. You can be negative on it. I'm trying to just trying to be realistic about it. It's really hard for me to be negative on this team. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that needs to happen for me, like, because obviously the blatant, the blatant elephant in the room is what Trey Lance is going to be. But I've personally seen enough out of Trey Lance, not only what he was able to do as far as his growth from rep to rep, basically, and game to game, but also just the character of the kid. His work ethic, his ability to want to be a constant student, his humility, like the way he carries himself in the media, and just the leadership, like the intangibles. Calling guys that were just drafted, even though he was just drafted last year, right? Getting guys together. He even did that last off season. Working with the receiving core and holding private workouts with the guys and things like that. You see him hanging out with the team. Like Kittle and Sudfeld and all of that, going to Warriors games, like just things like that really just make me believe not only does he understand the role that he's in, but even if he doesn't get it immediately, Jack, he's going to figure it out because he's willing to put in the work and he's doing all of the right things that you would want from your starting quarterback. But the biggest thing for me is, especially with, Trey Lance's strength being the play action pass and just how this team is built as far as run first, we got to be able to have some explosion out of the running game. And I don't mean like the 60-yard breakaway touchdowns like Mostert and Breida had in 2019, but a consistent rushing attack that could average over 4.5 yards per carry. And for everything that we, mentioned about Elijah Mitchell, he's very, very good, but he sometimes struggled to keep a game where he's having over 4.5 yards per carry. And for everything that there was flashes of Trey Sermon that we saw, same, like we can't just be a volume game where we're just rushing the ball so many times without getting the production of 4.5 plus yards per carry. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm assuming is going to happen. But the only reason why it happened last year or they were anywhere close was because Debo was averaging like over 5 yards per carry, and he started getting a lot of carries in the second half of the season. So that running back room has to be a bulk of the explosion in the rushing attack because, we don't know, but I mean, at least from reports, Debo wants to play more of a traditional wide receiver role and doesn't want to necessarily be that wide back position anymore. So if there's any truth to that, we definitely need that running back room to maintain that 4.5 plus per carry average. And that's something that I'm assuming, Jack, without without maybe much evidence to say that that's going to happen, right? Especially with the question marks at the offensive line without knowing if Mac is going to be there and what is Banks going to be like.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I definitely think there's some good points that you made right there in the running game, especially like you said. If they could just be consistently chewing up clock, getting 4.5 yards a carry, like you said, I think that's part of where they had some issues last year. Is they weren't getting 4.5 yards per carry. They weren't up that high. They were at 4 point. They finished the season I think at 4.1, 4.0, somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really, it was feast or famine with them. They'd either rip off a big one or they were, it wasn't consistent, chunks like we've seen with them at different points throughout the Shanahan regime. So if they can get that with Tyrion Davis-Price and have him be healthy so that if Elijah Mitchell goes down, they have somebody that they can fill in right there. And if I think they're going to be able to probably do that. And I think you go to, if Deebo Samuel is able to play wide receiver full time and Trey Lance is the guy who we think it is, I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah. And I mean, I agree as well. Like, I think that Kyle Shanahan and especially Anthony Lynn being there, because Anthony Lynn, for all of his flaws that, might be there as far as game calling and, maybe some late game decision making and things like that, as far as what he's able to do with running backs, it's pretty elite. He's always been able to have really good rushing attack. And even with Detroit last year, he had, those guys, that rushing attack was pretty formidable. So I think that he's going to bode well for the team. And and other than that, I think that just sets up the rest of everything else. Another thing that I am assuming is going to happen, Jack, without much evidence there, is this team is going to be much better. This offense is going to be much better in the first quarter than they have been last season, because especially with the way the schedule is this year, they're gonna be playing some pretty prolific offenses throughout the year, and hoping that the defense could just keep the game extremely close in the first half, like they kind of did last season. I think the defense is still up to the challenge, but I would hope that this team could help them by scoring more in that first quarter, early in the second quarter, and not just waiting till the last 2 minutes of every half to really, put together a drive and score a touchdown. I think that's something that I assume will happen more with this offense, but who knows? And I think that is going to be pretty important for this team to reach the levels that we're expecting. I don't think that they've lost so many close games last season. I think just having the start be a lot better keeps it easier for them to win, because I just think they're going to have more than enough talent to win. Execution is the really big thing that we need to see, and starting from minute one.
Yeah, and just kind of checking over in the comments, there was, for example, Tom comes in and he says, we're either going to be 14-3 or 13-4 this year. That's his thought. It will be us against Tampa Bay in the NFC Championship game. The winner of that game will play Buffalo in the Super Bowl. And, and then we have people telling him that he's crazy, or no, just says sorry, but no. And I come up with 13 wins on that when I look at this schedule as well. The way that I see it, you're talking about starting off strong, and I know you're speaking about games, like the start of a game in particular, like first quarter. But I think it goes for the record as well for the season. If they can come out and start strong, part of the 2019 team was that they were lucky in the beginning of the season. They started off 8-0. They kind of struggled down the second half of the season before getting it all together in the playoffs when they got healthy again with D Ford. But that was a team that started off hot. They started off 8-0, right? I think they were 8-0 before they lost their first game. And when I look at this, the way the schedule falls for the 49ers, the toughest game in the first 6 weeks is Denver, in Denver. Again, and I that's just that for me, that's the toughest, I think. And I think that they can start off 6-0 and put themselves in a really good spot. And even the Denver game, the reason I feel like the 49ers can win there is that's a game against the team with a brand new head coach who's never done it before, with an offensive coordinator who's never done it before, and a defensive coordinator who's never done it before. And there's nothing about that game from a coaching standpoint that says that the 49ers are in trouble. I understand Russell Wilson's there, and he's given the 49ers fits, but I think this is a little bit different situation. I think the 49ers are going to be able to handle it. And we've seen what they can do against the Rams. The Rams are everybody's pick to click this year. The 49ers beat them twice and were ahead of them by 10 points in the fourth quarter before folding. And that was with the quarterback who was missing wide open receivers, not throwing the ball to him.
Yeah. I mean, I penciled in Denver as their first loss of the season. I have them going 5-1 in that 6-game stretch. But I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's a team on paper that I look at and just says that much better than the 49ers. I think the only reason too that it's even close is because, Trey Lance is just a question mark. We don't know how good he's actually going to be. We kind of believe maybe his floor isn't as bad. So we think that he'll be good enough to keep the team where it needs to be. But if he turns out being epic, Jack, I don't think there's a team that's even close to the 49ers. Really, if we get the elite type of quarterback play where we're talking Trey Lance Pro Bowl in this year, which I'm not stating that that's going to happen. I'm just saying if we get a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback play, you got to say this team, it has to be the favorite for the Super Bowl with all the talent that it's around and the type of defense that has been constructed and all that kind of stuff. So it's really just about Trey, like you mentioned on multiple occasions. If Trey is just an average quarterback, kind of like Jimmy G, then this team probably goes 12-5, 13-4, no problem. If he ends up playing lights out, like Pro Bowl level, this team is probably number one in the NFC and probably the Super Bowl champs, right? So it's really like, up to that. So I know this is all projections and conjecture at this time, but I'm really pretty confident that this is going to be one of the better teams in the NFC. And I believe they win the NFC West. I don't know about you.
That's what I have. I have them as winning the NFC West as well. And again, I feel like they're really good. And here's the thing, okay, we both are pretty confident about this team. This brings us back to that whole blind spots thing.
Mm-hmm.
This team lost Laken Tomlinson. They lost DJ Jones, K'Wan Williams, and Jaquaski Tart. How did they replace them?
Aaron Banks.
Okay, go ahead. You run through them.
So Aaron Banks, Javon Kinlaw, to be determined, right? It's either Quez or maybe Womack for K1, and then Oren, right, for the safety.
Okay, so we have Laken Tomlinson, and you're saying it's going to be Banks, which I'd agree with, and if we're going to, and I'm going to qualify my statement in that I don't believe that everything I hear out of the 49ers is a lie. And when I hear Kyle Shanahan at the owners meeting say that they were ready to start Aaron Banks at the second half of the season, but then they started rolling, I don't think he's lying, because he said the same thing about Trey Lance, and I think he would have made the change if they weren't in playoff contention. You would have seen Trey Lance take over earlier and get those reps. Banks is a guy who people just we haven't seen enough of, and so he's an unknown from that point. So if I can understand why people would question that, although I don't question it as much as they do, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there we go. And then on the defensive side, DJ Jones. I like DJ Jones. Thought he was a really good player. I have a hard time believing that a guy who played 50% of the snaps or less is going to make or break your defensive line.
Right.
And I do agree with you that it's going to be replacing DJ Jones as Javon Kinlaw. But on top of that, they have a strong group amount of depth. That defensive line is,
the rotation's nasty.
Yes, right. You could build out four sets of defensive line deep, and I think be pretty solid, even in the regular season, with guys who some people don't know about, but are pretty good, have been decent with the 49ers practice squad over the last couple of years. So I don't have an issue. I think the defensive line is going to be just fine without DJ Jones. I don't think that's a major issue for the 49ers. Didn't the 49ers go to the Super Bowl without DJ Jones in 2019? Didn't he get injured against the Seahawks on Monday Night Football and miss the rest of the season that year? Mm-hmm. I believe, right? And again, this isn't a take away from DJ Jones. He's a really good player. He deserved the money that he got. If Denver wants to pay you, pay you. The Laken Tomlinson thing, again, Laken Tomlinson is a guy who I think gets a lot of credit from 49er fans because he is available and he was there every day. But when you sit down and you really look at his play, it's not something that's, they can't overcome the loss of Laken Tomlinson, at least in my opinion. And then, the nickel cornerback, I do agree. That's K'Wan Williams. That's one right now where we don't know. They don't put a lot of emphasis on that spot, in terms of capital. We know that they beat the Rams in the Week 18 game with Darquez Dennard and Dante Johnson splitting the game up at in the slot. We don't expect him to do that throughout the whole season, but that's definitely to be determined there. And from a coverage standpoint, I would be really fine with the 49ers as a cover guy having Samuel Womack be my nickel corner. Mm-hmm. Because of his speed and his ability to drive on the ball and those types of things. I think he'd be very good in there, but I think they might be having him play more on the outside. And then this was a long answer by me, but then at safety, you went with Oren, with the George Odom.
George Odom, sorry.
Yeah,
they're gonna put a linebacker back there in Oren.
You went with George Odom. I know. I started to say it, and then I realized that you went with George Odom. I think it's going to be Talanoa Hufanga. I think the 49ers like Talanoa Hufanga more than everybody else does. I understand that he made some mistakes as a rookie. I saw it too, just like all of you. I chuckled to myself when he blew the coverage against the Minnesota Vikings because it was an awful rep. If you're a 49ers fan and you're gonna show the highlight of the touchdown where Talanoa Hufanga blows it against the Minnesota Vikings, you've got to go and you've got to also show the highlight of the NFC Championship game when Jimmy Ward does the exact same thing. The only difference was that Ward's didn't cost him a touchdown because the receiver dropped the ball, but he did the same exact thing against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. I think early in the second half it was. So, Talanoa Hufanga gets ripped. I don't know why. I think people, don't like the long hair and they don't like the comparisons to a Hall of Famer. And I agree with them that there shouldn't be any comparisons to
Polamalu.
To Troy Polamalu, right? But I think that he's a guy who can start, and I think the 49ers like him, and they're 2-1 with him as a starting safety as well. Right. And the one time that they lost, he wasn't playing with Jimmy Ward. He was playing with somebody who's not on the team anymore. I don't know. I can't remember his name.
And also, sorry, your answer was so fire that
I set your building on fire.
Yeah, man, they're like, yo, Jack's bringing the heat. Like, some of the comment section is saying, but I mean, look, sometimes we get nostalgic about certain players. K1 wasn't that good last season, Jack. And, K1 has, obviously been such a good player for the 49ers for a long time. He's been in and out of the lineup because of injuries. Last year, I've seen so many times where he just got burnt. He wasn't as quick as he was able to be, and seemed like he was losing more battles than he was winning. So, I mean, obviously the camaraderie, he is a team favorite, and but I think it's time to go younger and develop another guy there. And I think that a lot of the safety play is actually going to be easier because our cornerback room just got a lot better, Jack. And so, that I think is going to help out the safeties where, you're not going to be seeing as many blown coverages by our corners because, our cornerback room has gotten a lot better. And one of the reasons why I think the second half of the season is going to be pretty dominant, Jack, is I think Jason Verrett comes back after the bye week. I don't know if he's going to be healthy enough. I know a lot of people don't think he's going to make the team, but I do think he's going to make the team. I do think that they're going to keep him on the PUP list, and maybe after the bye is where they bring him out. And if he can stay anywhere near as healthy as he was in 2020, him and Ward on the outside, Jack, I think that's the best cornerback duo that we've had since '94 with Deion Sanders. And I think it was, I forget who was on that. It was a lot on the other side of him. But the Super Bowl year, or
Deion Sanders?
Deion Sanders, and who was on the other side of Deion and Eric Davis, right? Eric Davis and Deion Sanders. I think Ward and Verrett would be the best duo since them, right? So I really think that I just really think that there's a lot of depth on this team. I think that the defense is going to be. I mean, we're getting a whole season of Dre Greenlaw, and he might not even be. He might not even beat out Aziz as far as his playing time and all that kind of stuff. So it's just like there's a lot of depth and a lot of stars all over the field. And I just think that this is a very, very formidable team that the team has put together, 49ers put together.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's really good there. We also forgot that of the changes that they made was the quarterback one as well. So that those are the five big changes with the 49ers. Dusty Gold, really quick, he says, saw Hugh Freeze, the Liberty head coach, interviewed and thought it was Jack. Check it out. That's
Jack kind of goes in and out of roles. Like, we only see him every now and then on YouTube, but we don't get to see what he's doing off camera when he's actually coaching Liberty as their football coach, head coach.
Hey, the most impressive thing about Hugh Freeze was, I don't know if you remember, but he actually coached a game from a hospital bed that they put in the press box. He actually coached the game from a hospital bed in there. So and they won too. They won that game. Hugh Freeze, that's a good one, Mr. Freeze. I like it a lot.
So you wanted to end on Rich Eisen?
Yeah, let's talk. Well, yeah, Rich Eisen. Rich Eisen is always he's been a really good follow over the offseason. He had that interview with Trey Lance right after the NFC Championship game before the Super Bowl, which was kind of cool. That was the one where Lance started to talk about how he expected to be the starter and then walked it back. So we've heard a lot of different things, and he had everybody's favorite 49er quarterback. Well, at least if you weren't a 49er fan in the early 80s, if you're more of a late 80s 49er fan beyond, Steve Young, the Hall of Famer. I love hearing Steve Young talk because I think he's pretty current because of his role on Monday Night Football. He's talked a lot about Trey Lance over the last year. And this was the first time I'd heard him be interviewed since the 49ers, the week after the 49ers lost to the Rams. So it was a pretty good one. What were your takeaways from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason why a lot of people like Steve Young is the same reason why a lot of people like you, Jack. I think that both of you guys have the similar trait where you're pretty even keel, and you're very much able to see both sides of the argument. And I think you're pretty just genuine about the answers. And I think that was the biggest thing that I saw from Steve Young. It's like he's not overhyping Trey Lance by any stretch of the imagination, but he also subtly shut down every negative thing that was being said about Trey Lance. And what I mean by that is like, the biggest, there's this, and I believe that the NFL media and a lot of them are being extremely hard on the 49ers. And I think a lot of that, this is my conspiracy theory, is that because of the way Shanahan and Lynch play the media and allow them to run with narratives and kind of rub it in their face when they're wrong, I think that they're getting it back now as far as the way that they're being evaluated, as far as their offseason and where they're being ranked and all this kind of stuff. So unfortunately, Trey ends up becoming a lot of the I guess the focus. And what I took from what Steve Young said specifically about Trey was, look, when you say he's ready, what does ready mean? Like, we don't know because we haven't seen enough of him. And there's no way for him to be ready because he hasn't played enough football to necessarily be ready. But what we can say is all of the things that we're looking for that could be like the biggest issues, I don't have a real worry about him. I think he has the mental aptitude, he said. I think he has all the tools. We know he has the athleticism, the arm strength. I think he knows how to read the defense. I think he knows where to get the ball to. But the things that we don't know are the things that only come when you start playing the game more and more. And it was really interesting to hear him talk about the mind of a quarterback. It's like, I know the ball needs to get here, but will my body actually get it to the place that I need it to get to at the time that I needed to get there? And he was saying, like, I think Trey Lance can do that, but we have to wait and see whether or not he could execute. So it wasn't about Trey not having the tools, the talent, and all this kind of stuff, which a lot of people are talking about, like, oh, he's, just not good enough. It's what the biggest takeaway I took is Steve Young is just like, this guy hasn't played a lot of football. He didn't play a lot in college. He obviously hasn't played a lot in the NFL. It's going to take time for him to realize what he can and can't do. And that was kind of interesting to me because that made a lot of sense. It's like, he could do everything. He knows he could be capable of everything, but he still has to show that he could execute it, not only to the team, but also to himself, which was the biggest takeaway that I took, is like, Trey has to prove some things to himself too and learn some things about himself, which was a different take than I had heard from anybody else.
Yeah, no, I thought it was really good. Before I get going on my response, Adrian says, what's up, Jack and Suneil? Good to have you on board, Adrian. You're not going to like me. He also says, let's not condemn or anoint the kid before he had a season or two of playing time. Sorry, you're not going to like my answer here. No, but go check out 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. I actually took that part of the interview and did an article about it because it was fantastic. It starts off with him basically telling you that saying that Trey Lance isn't ready. Saying that Trey Lance isn't ready is probably, this. I'm not going to put words in Steve Young's mouth, but the way that I read it is that if your only reason to not like it is because you think that Trey Lance isn't ready, you're not doing your homework and it's a lazy response. That's the way that I took that to be. And I do believe that. I think if you look at Trey Lance and you take the body of work that we've seen, which is the game against Arizona, the game against the half that
Houston.
he played against, the game against Houston, the half against Seattle. You take that, you compare it to his college tape, and you actually do the work beyond just having your confirmation bias, and you actually do the work of looking at his film. You see a guy who, at least I saw a guy who made throws against Houston that I didn't see him make at North Dakota State, or I didn't even see him attempt at North Dakota State. I saw a guy who, as Steve Young said, there's a lot of things that he said that were really good. The part where he's talking about the issue being, seeing it and knowing that it's there and the arm actually getting it there and so on. We saw that in a small chunk against Houston. We saw it in a small chunk against Arizona in week 5, but even more so against Houston, because you go back to that Houston game and Trey Lance's, one of his first pass attempts is actually what I think was his first pass attempt. He drops back, he looks to his left. He's going to have a shot to Brandon Ayuk on a deep curl. He just has to get the ball out of his hand in time, but he doesn't trust what he's seen, so he takes off and scrambles and doesn't get the first down. The next time they get the ball, they're running a slant to his left. It's there, but for whatever reason, he doesn't trust his eyes, and instead of releasing it, he takes off scrambling to his right. He ends up completing a pass, but those are the situations what Young's talking about, right? Is him seeing it and knowing that the ball needs to get there, and then the arm getting the ball there. It's not really about his touch or any of those kind of things. It's putting what you're seeing and what you know is there and actually getting the ball there. And we saw him do that in the end of the second quarter against Houston and then throughout the second half, because the quick slant that he missed early on the game, he hit. The throw to that he missed on the whole shot on the deep curl to Brandon Ayuk, he hit that. And so I think when you look at this as a whole, if he grows from where he was week 17, this 49ers team is going to be very good, because in the NFL, you need the quarterback to drive the bus to an extent.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just very interesting. And like I said, Steve Young didn't necessarily anoint him in any stretch of the imagination, but he did hush a lot of these narratives that are being created. And basically, I think Steve Young is a big fan of Trey. I think that he believes that Trey is going to be very good. And I think that he understands. I mean, who knows better than Steve Young, who a lot of the same attributes that Trey has, Steve Young had, right? And I'm sure, he's coming off of obviously not playing, Jimmy isn't Joe Montana, but as far as, maybe some of the success that the 49ers have had as of late, obviously isn't the level that Joe Montana had when Steve Young was taking the reins, but, it's obviously pretty good comparatively to what the team has been the last 2 decades. So I think he kind of empathizes with Trey, understands probably more than most of what Trey's going through. And I think he also likes what he's seeing. And I'm excited to see it. I do think that we've seen a lot of growth in Trey, just like you stated. And I'm not saying that there's not going to be some downs there. Like, I still think that Trey, his accuracy could get better. He obviously has made some throws. Probably would have had a few more interceptions if guys caught the balls that he threw right at them. Defenders caught it that were going right at him. But I think also he was going in and out of the lineup. Now he is the starter. He's getting all the reps. He's, has the confidence. The plays are going to be called specifically for him. And I think that's gonna be a big difference. Not to mention he has a year under his belt in the NFL now.
Yeah, absolutely. And really quick, just like a couple of the comments over here. Tom says Trey is an incredibly quick learner, hard worker, way beyond his years. That's true. Adrian goes off what I was saying, and we're on the same page here. Says the Houston game showed me he got better. You could see tangible improvement by the second half of the game. I agree with that. The first half, I was pretty frustrated with him, but then he started rolling, and that all changed, and my feeling of the way that he played that game changed. And then Andrew says that Steve Young is a flip-flopper. I'm not sure why he's saying that. Steve Young's been very consistent when it comes to Trey Lance. He's even in this interview, he talks about the lack of playing time and how, where he is and that he's going to be going through some ups and downs, and we're going to be watching him. He said this is that we're going to see this guy grow. He didn't play enough in college to go through and just get the reps of knowing everything that he's capable of. And so he's going to be learning that in front of us. And I think that's partly why I was happy that he spent all of last season on the bench, other than those 2 games.
I agree, man. It's going to be fun to see training camp.
Absolutely.
Upcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know they got into Deebo Samuel a little bit as well. Steve Young was saying that it's important for Deebo Samuel to be there for Trey, and really for him to be in shape and motivated.
Focused is the word.
Focused was the word he used. Yeah, that's a little bit better word. That's a much better word than motivated, right? Because I think he will be. I think the reason Steve Young put, I'm guessing, but I think the reason he's talking about the focus is because of the contract thing. So now he's got to focus and shift from that to being ready for the games.
I agree.
Yeah. So that's it for tonight. I think we're going to be wrapping up the show here. I want to say thanks to everybody in the comment section. You guys were great. That was a lot of fun. You guys had some good comments over there. Suneil, what have you got coming up?
Yeah, so I'm going on with Jesse right after this. This is obviously Tuesday, which is my hammer and nails day. So with hammer, next with nails, and yeah, man. And then Wednesday, we'll see. I mean, I'm gonna try to get a guest host, or maybe go live on my own, or maybe not. I don't know. The Warriors are playing, so maybe I'll just let everybody just watch the Warriors, and then I'll probably do something this weekend, Friday, Saturday. Might go on and just chop it up with the fans, but. Yeah, Jack, pretty laid back. This is kind of the time of the season where not too much going on. Thankfully, the 49ers have been making waves in the offseason as far as, all the drama and all the news and stuff like that. It's nice to have a few weeks of just casual conversation, right?
There you go. Absolutely. So make sure you get over and check that out. You get to be hammered and nailed tonight, and then you have all the stuff going on your channel. So that's good as well. Really quick though, too, Matt asks Jack off topic question: did the Niners use a 3-4-D in the 80s Super Bowl ones? Yeah, they were a 3-4 defense back at that time. That was a really popular defense in the 80s. And yeah, so they were using the 3-4. They kind of did a little bit of a variation of it, like everybody does. But they were so yeah, get over to Suneil's channel, subscribe there. He's got good content. Check him out on Jesse's channel. Before you leave, hit that subscribe button, whichever way. I'm pointing the wrong directions.
I got it. I got you.
Yeah, just pay attention. Don't pay. I'm like over here. I'm the guy on airplane trying to bring the plane in and crashes through the building. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Get over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. I think you're going to like the most recent article that I posted today. Yesterday, I had my schedule breakdown. So if you haven't seen that one, check them both out. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. But again, subscribe, like, hit that little bell notification so you don't miss us. Thanks again. Have a great week. I'll be back on Thursday night with Jesse Naylor for the Hammer and Nail Show. Thank you. Take care, everybody, and we'll be back with you soon. Talk to you soon.